Okay, here we go with our next video. This one is all about something called scanner. And scanner is how we're going to be able to get input from the user in Java. As always, I invite you to code along with me. Don't just think that you got the concept because you watched the video or you looked at the source code. What you want to do is build kind of like muscle memory by doing this. Build up some repetition. So let's hop into this and we'll get introduced to scanner. So in Java, we learned that every variable's data type is either a primitive data type. Quick pause, how many primitive data types? We got 8 in Java. A little bit harder question. Can you name what they are? Okay, you only need to know 4 of them for this class, but it's big brain if you can name all 8 primitive data types. There's int, double, char, and boolean. Those are the 4 I'm asking you to know. Additionally to that, 4 others that I don't care if you know or not is byte, short, long, and float. So every variable's data type, we learned about variables and how each variable is going to have a data type. We have 8 primitive data types to choose from. It can be one of those 8. If it's not one of those 8, it is something called an object. You don't really have to know anything about objects in this class. Just know that if it's not one of these 8 primitive data types, it's going to be an object. Scanner is not on this list. We're about to see scanner used as a data type for a variable, and that could be a little bit confusing. It is a data type, but scanner is not a primitive data type. It's going to be an object. Scanner is an object that can be implemented to get input from the user, either from a file or directly from the keyboard. In years past, I've read from a file. I think we're going to skip that this year. We're only going to be reading from a keyboard, but the option is available to read from a file. What am I saying? You could have a text file, right, with nothing but text in it, maybe numbers. Scanner could be used to read that file and like basically bring data into your program. We're going to be using it to read from keyboard, so the user could actually enter some response. So for now, let's see how scanner can be used to get input from the user via keyboard. There are 4 steps that I'm going to outline here. Here is the overview of these 4 steps. We're going to break it apart and talk about each one. First thing, we're going to need something called an import statement. Import statements appear at the beginning of a Java file, even before the class header, and are used to import libraries that are not included in the Java default. Okay, so there's something like the Java default library. It's technically in java.lang. Everything you don't have to know that. You don't have to know that. Okay, but basically they've added stuff to Java as we go, and they're like these supplemental packages, right? Like I write a bit of code, I bundle it up in a folder, and I make it something that you can add in as you please. It's included with the Java download, the JDK download, but it's not necessarily in your program until you tell it to be there. That's what an import statement is. That's our first step, is to import. The second is that we're actually going to create our variable. We're going to create a scanner object, and we're going to save it into a variable. Here, that's what's happening. Right? We've actually kind of seen this syntax before. In this above example, the name of the scanner object is input. More precisely, I'm creating a scanner variable. Right? We learned when we talked about variables that every variable is going to need a data type and a variable name. That's what's happening here. We're creating a variable called input, but the data type is not one of those primitive data types. The data type is scanner, an object. So in this example, the name of the scanner object, more precisely the variable, is input. It doesn't have to be. This is simply a variable name, right? I can change this to whatever I want. Another popular one that you may end up seeing in source code online is KB, meaning, let's say, short for keyboard. So you're creating a scanner object that's reading from the keyboard. It doesn't have to be. This is simply a variable name. I like input, and you'll see me use that, but keep in mind it could be anything, any valid variable name. A statement requesting input is technically not required, right? This is step 3. It's just a system.out.println line. Right? This is technically not required. You could create your scanner object and it function, right? It works, it does what it's supposed to, but it's going to be pretty confusing to the user. I'll show you what I mean in actual code. If you don't implement a statement requesting input from the user won't know the program is waiting for them to provide input. What's going to end up happening is that you'll have your scanner, your program's running, and it's going to be waiting for the user to input some value. But if you don't have this prompt telling them to do that, the computer's just sitting there waiting and the user has no idea. Our fourth and final step is that we need a statement that actually captures the input from the user and saves it into a variable. Okay, the overall abstract concept here is we're going to bring scanner into our program. Our scanner is then going to basically is going to be created. We're then going to tell the user to input some data, and our scanner variable is going to be waiting there to actually get that data and put it into our program. That's this fourth step. Here I'm creating a variable. Right? In this case, it's a double variable called my variable. And what I'm assigning it is input.nextDouble. Okay? This is the last thing you need. This is what's actually telling the scanner, get a double from the user. And then it saves it into a variable. This above statement will attempt to save the next double. The user enters via keyboard. How do I know it's keyboard? Well, right here, whenever we created the scanner, we're saying it reads from system.in. That's the keyboard. So we're going to get the next double from the keyboard using our scanner, and we're going to save it into a variable called my variable. Right? Because I'm asking for a double, my variable's a double. Note that input refers to the name of the scanner that we constructed earlier. Right? Input, this was back in step 2. I created a scanner called input. Well, I told you like another popular option is KB. This is just a variable, so it's whatever you want to call it, but whatever you call it here is how you end up referring to it in the fourth step. Let's implement this, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to bring up my temp converter code, and we're going to implement scanner. Oh, fat fingered something there. Okay, so here's temp converter. Right? We're just hard coding the data in right now. What I want to do is implement scanner. So this Fahrenheit temperature, it's not something that's hard coded into the source code directly. It's going to be user input at the end of the day. There are 4 steps to implementing scanner. My very first is an import statement that appears even before my class header. So up above my class header, I'm going to say import java.util.scanner. Okay, this is grayed out at the moment. That's because we're not actually using it just yet. We're basically just telling our program to access this directory where scanner is found. Like this notation, right? java.util.scanner. It's effectively a folder. There's a folder called Java, and in that folder there is a folder called util, and in that is where scanner can be found. That's all we're effectively doing. This is kind of like a file path. So we got access to scanner. My next step is to construct a scanner object, and that's going to take place in our main method. So I'm down here in the main method. It doesn't really matter where we end up getting it, kinda, right? Ultimately, I'm going to end up using this Fahrenheit variable, and so I want to do this stuff before I create that variable. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. So this is my second step. I'm going to create a scanner object called whatever you want. I'm going to use input, and that is going to be a new scanner that reads from system.in. Right, this left-hand side, you've seen this syntax before. We're creating a variable. We're creating a scanner variable called input. We made some variables, some integer variables, some double variables. This is technically following the same syntax. We have a data type and a variable name. I'm then using the assignment operator to assign it to, and this is different. This is a object that we're actually creating over here. I'm creating a new scanner object, and this particular scanner object is going to read from the keyboard. Don't worry too much about this, just know the steps. Right? So step 1 was to import scanner. Step 2, actually create your scanner object and save it into a variable. Okay, notice that this is not gray anymore. That's because we're actually using scanner. Before that, I wasn't technically using that. Now step 3 is not actually required, but I'm going to add it in. We'll run the program, we'll see how it functions, and I'll take out this third step and you'll see why I consider it one of the crucial steps. I'm going to, in this third step, prompt the user. I'm going to use a system.out.println to ask the user to enter something, right? Something like, well, ultimately what we're trying to get from them is a Fahrenheit temperature. Please enter a temperature in Fahrenheit. Okay, this is my third step. I am prompting the user. I'm asking them, please enter a temperature in Fahrenheit. Okay, my fourth and final step is to use my scanner object, input in this case, to get data from the user, to actually tell my scanner object, okay, we're ready, get the next thing that the user enters. In my particular program, what I want is a double, right? And what I want to do is reuse this Fahrenheit variable. I don't want to hard code stuff in. Instead of 73.2, what I'm going to do is take my scanner and tell it to capture the next double that the user enters. And that's effectively my fourth and final step. Okay, let's take a look. First step, we import scanner. We're saying go into this folder and gain access to scanner. Our second step, we actually make our scanner object. In this particular example, I named it input. Our third step is we're prompting the user, letting them know that we are ready for them. We then tell our scanner object, right? I called it input. We tell our scanner object to capture the next double. That's going to take that number and then save it into my variable. Once it's in this variable, it's in my program, right? Notice that the rest of my program refers to fa. Previously, we were hard coding values in. And one of the things that I really like about this is it's going to show you why variables are awesome. So I'm going to tell my program to run. And then we're going to see a lot of stuff happen down here in the console. First thing, please enter a temperature in Fahrenheit. Take a look. You see how this is red? Right? I have the ability to stop my program. The only reason why I can stop my program is because it's running. This is waiting on me. Please enter a temperature in Fahrenheit. Let's do something we know first, right? Like 32. Okay, why is this awesome? I'm going to run the program again. Please enter temperature in Fahrenheit. How about 212? Right, before, what we were having to do was edit the source code directly. What I'm making here is something a little bit more dynamic. My program is effectively changing based on user input, right? I'm running the code. I'm able to punch in a value that I want to convert, and it does it on the spot. Oh, sorry. I got this still in here from whenever we were playing with that. If you missed the stuff talking about integer division, make sure you check that out. So 212 goes to 100, and then something funky like that temperature in Celsius is this. I'm sorry, this temperature in Fahrenheit is this in Celsius. Okay, so a couple of things here, a couple of big takeaways. We can use scanner to get input from the user. That's awesome. It makes our programs more dynamic. We're not editing source code in order to basically cause changes in our program. We're able to execute it and do it at the point of execution during runtime. Okay, that makes our programs more dynamic. And this is made possible because of variables, right? I need to basically get input from the user. This Fahrenheit temperature is input from the user. And this is only possible because I have a variable to save it in. And then once it's in this variable, I'm referencing that, right? Multiple places. I'm using it in the temperature conversion here, and here I'm using it in my annotation. Okay, the last thing I want to show you, and we'll wrap up the video, is this line here, this prompt that I told you about. I said that this is not technically necessary, and in fact, I'm going to delete it. Right, that's step 3 to implementing Scanner, in my opinion. I'm going to get rid of the prompt. Let's run our program. There it is. It's running. Right? Remember earlier I told you this little red button that's letting me stop. I'm able to stop because it's actually running. It's actually sitting here waiting for me to enter some data. Right? It's waiting for me to come in here and enter a Fahrenheit temperature. But if you're a user of the program, you don't know that. Right? You don't know that it's waiting. That is the whole idea behind step 3, this prompt. Okay. That's going to effectively be it for Scanner. The only thing I would maybe consider doing is putting a systemout.println line up here, or several that kind of talk about what the program does, right? This program converts a temperature from Fahrenheit to Celsius. Celsius. Okay. That's about the only other change I would make, but I mean, our program is way more dynamic, and that's thanks to Scanner.